So, episode 34, two FMA-Nerds talk about stuff. I just want to warn you guys ahead of time. I had some technical errors with this particular live stream. I try to edit it as best as I can, but for some reason, my internet up here in Alaska has been shit. I don't know what to do. Don't know what to tell you. But anyways, I try to do my best with the editing. Anyways, it's a great episode. Sionnach and I got into some shenanigans. And yeah, we talked a little bit more about mental health than expected. It's a little heavy. We talked about some spiritualism. And yeah, it's an overall great episode. And yeah, like I said, I want to apologize for the video quality. I try to edit as best as I can, but it is what it is. So let's get right into it and enjoy the episode. Morning, everybody. Coach Kurt here with the Elves Sky Fight Team, doing another episode of Two FMA-Nerds Talk About Stuff. This is episode 34, almost getting to 50, then wherever we go from there. Anyway, so I'm bringing on Chris Sionnach, got it, from Vulpes Trainers, and he's a cool dude. So we're just going to bring him on. He's going to tell a story, and yeah, just hang out. Make sure to ask questions, because interacting is fun. Also share the stuff. So anyways, let's bring him on. Sionnach, how's it going, man?
Hey, how are you, Kurt?
Not bad, man. I have coffee, and yeah, I'm good.
I have water because it's about 85 degrees in this shop at any given time. So
that's
nice
rough.
And dusty and hot, but
I mean, it's the joys of doing the thing. So, yeah. So while I share this out, can you tell us a story as to who you are, where you come from, what you do, and yeah, we'll take it from there.
Well, I'm here in Rochester, New York. We were talking earlier. I worked for about almost 30 years in the mental health field, working with adolescents with whether mental health issues or traumatic abuse backgrounds, kids who had also been court placed by family court and gang-related backgrounds. Mostly worked as a crisis intervention specialist, so there's a lot of dealing with the physical altercations. It was also worked as a trainer where we would train staff and how to navigate physical altercations, how to safely neutralize stuff like that, and to whether that's physical restraints or verbal de-escalation skills, just managing the environment to reduce the kinds of triggers that would cause those kinds of things. Nearly 30 years of that. I was definitely feeling like I needed a rest, body and soul, from that kind of work. COVID came along. COVID managed to give me like a lot of people some extra time on hand to do things. And I was like, I'm gonna build a little workshop in my garage so I can mess around, do guy stuff in my garage kind of thing. And I wanted to make some of my own training weapons because I wasn't happy with what I had. And so I started experimenting with materials and making my own stuff, showed them to friends, and they're like, oh, make me one of those. All right, I'll make you one. And then, started getting better, messing around with different materials, and people would be like, well, I'll buy one from you. I'm like, you'd buy this? Next thing you know, it turned into, well, maybe I can make enough money doing this to like pay for like my, my classes and stuff, my kitty classes and stuff. And that one thing after another spiraled out of control into this became a full-time business going on. I think we're over the 4-year mark, getting into the 5th year now of full-time Vulpes training. And now I've sold stuff, thousands and thousands of trainers at this point, and all over the world. And my wife got me a little map that I can mark off which country I've got to, and the map is pretty much getting, full of marks everywhere at this point.
That's
So
awesome.
it's been great. It's been a great experience. It's been a nice way to move on from an old career, and been able to carry some of the stuff I've learned from that over to here. And I think that's been a big factor in making it all work well.
Dude, that's amazing, because I mean, I come from, as we talked before, and a lot of people know on this podcast, that I also come from a trauma background, trauma education, behavioral health, mental health, and recovery. So trying to find something to resource life after all of that and find yourself, ground yourself, and like to heal all of that by way of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. What a beautiful way to do that, by channeling all that energy into something beautiful and creative, and also something that is loved by our community. Because like the cool thing about our community is we're a bunch of fucking nerds that like swords, and
that's the deep dark secret of martial arts.
Yeah, and what's great about being a martial arts nerd is, one, as an adult, we can afford our swords, but two, it resources that and nurtures that inner child, where there's that beautiful phase of when we swung swords or sticks in the backyard and thought they were swords to slay dragons, and that wonderment of make-believe. But as adults, I mean, we do the same thing. We just don't put it in the context of slaying dragons, but in a lot of cases we do, and those mental health dragons and demons. So good on you for finding that, man. That's beautiful.
It's funny you say that about, touching, the inner child. I have some family friends where their son was about 9 and his birthday came around, and I made him a sword, because boys like swords. So I made the kid a sword, and he started telling me how he had, he had the monster under the bed and the monster behind the door, I had the same thing, monsters behind every dark shadow in my room kind of thing. And this kid was like, oh, I could use this to fight the monsters.
Yeah.
So I helped spin a story to him of how he could use the sword to, I talked a bit about alpha I can never say it correctly, alpha numerato. The whole thing of, they were supposedly drawing words and letters with the sword.
Yeah.
I think it might be related to anti-hunting practice, if that's right. But basically, magic with your sword. The sword's a magic wand in combat, almost in concept. So I told him, I said, oh, there's a thing that people used to do with that kind of thing, and he was just like, he took off with that, and now he's had that sword for over a year, and his dad's like, you know what? He has no problem with monsters in his room anymore. Yeah. Because he's got this sword, and the sword gave him this empowerment with his imagination that he's fighting these fears.
Yeah.
And then, talk about getting in touch with the inner child. That's a kid getting in touch with his present child. For adults, because I do custom orders and I get people who, can you make me this or that? The amount of guys, grown men, who all want the He-Man sword.
Or Batlap.
I haven't made the He-Man sword. I've done those, but I haven't done the He-Man sword yet, because I just want to make sure I can do it right and been held off. But it's not kids that are asking for He-Man swords and the Conan sword. It's grown men who are like, want that, and that just captures into one of the reasons why we do what we do is, we're capturing something that's part of our soul that just never quite goes away.
Yeah, because you have to feed that. You have to resource that. Because let's face it, the Filipino actually beyond the Filipino martial arts world, the weapons-oriented martial arts, whether it's European, Southeast Asian, African, Latin American. I mean, the fact is, you're dealing with weapons that are intended to kill people, just straight up. Okay, a lot of blood was shed and a lot of bodies were stacked, so we can have the privilege of an academic, artistic pursuit that is known as the martial arts. So the weapons help tell a story and help carry a lineage of all of our forefathers from before. But why not honor them in such a way that is artistic and expressive, and resource that? So, because again, training war fighting can be very dark. It's very honorable. It's very noble. but it comes at a significant cost of our soul in a lot of ways if it's not put in the proper context and if it's not resourced properly. So having a tool to help, a way to have a tool that like helps honor that process and channel that in such a creative way, it's so important because we need stories to give reasons why we do stuff.
And that falls into, you know, some of my mindset in making stuff is, you know, making, you know, I could make trainers that if I wanted to, I could make trainers that were just very, very bare bones functional. You know, they're a sword shaped object that allows you to train with a partner or learn how to swing a sword properly. But I wanted to do something more so. I wanted to have things that inspire. I also I wanted to do for training weapons what like custom knife makers did for knives, you know, to make taking things, pushing the envelope, going beyond just function, but going to what is, you know, what is a knife? It's art, and it's a tool, and it's function, and it's history, and it's so many it's culture, so many things. You can go to different parts of the world and you can find a weapon or a knife from that area, and people, just as much as hearing a language or an accent, will go, oh, that's from this place or this region. You know, if you pick up a, you know, I don't have to tell people where this is from. You can recognize it like an accent. You know, it speaks its own language. So I wanted to be able to do that with trainers so that it could have that, you know, instead of just being a sword-shaped object, it carries a story, a message, and sometimes taking the story a little further.
Yeah.
You know, take a traditional design and play the what if game.
Yeah.
You know, I've done things. I have it's out of reach, although I grab it. I took the concept of a Zanzibar one day and I was like, what if there's a two-handed Zanzibar?
Yeah.
And I literally just made, like, you know, I put an extra long handle, extra long blade, and it was this amazing, you know, once I was done, I was like, this is amazing. You know, is it historical? No. But it's the exploration of these spaces, and you know what happens if you push the boundaries of what they are and what these stories are or were, and where could it helps us figure out where could they go from here.
Yeah,
because we're not just recreating or keeping a tradition, we're also taking it into the future. And so having tools and weapons that allow us to push the envelope or expand the borders of what could be, you know, it's one way of helping produce a future FMA that is relevant but still hangs on to what has been.
Yeah, it also creates a culture of change and consciousness, because going back to the tribal warfare methodologies of the past, there was an imperative for survival, where violence is always a tool, but violence was a set of currency, calling, and social archetype. The warrior, the soldier, the person who defends the tribe, which is a beautiful thing, but it also comes at the cost of brain, body, and spirit. Now, but as we moved into more of an urban society, especially here in the 21st century, we don't necessarily have to have like the call to train in the backyard with swords with our uncles and our cousins and our fathers. So we can allow that transition for training this stuff, but putting in the context that we do it because we love it, we do it because it's important, we do it because it's art, but we don't have the necessity that we have to do this because of the neighboring tribe. Now, some of us do because of professions of arms, whether
I was going to say that, you know, we have different cultural niches for these things.
Yeah, but for the 80% of martial arts nerds out there, beautiful martial arts nerds, there isn't that martial imperative because of professional violence and profession of arms. So for the rest of us, I mean, the training swords are a beautiful thing. So,
and it's funny you mention it, because that you know matches up some of my own personal, you know, experience in the trajectory of my life of going from a job where, you know, being physical altercations and
Mhm.
violent situations, you know, several times a day, to now I get up, have coffee with the dog, and go out into my shop and get creative and make things.
Mhm.
And I've actually had the conversation with myself, which you have a lot of those when you're working by yourself in a shop all day, just you
Yep.
and the grinder, you know, of, you know, feeling the difference of the imperative and motivation behind my training.
Mhm.
Before, it was the training had this motivation behind it that was, you know, backed by a lot of cortisol,
Mhm.
because every day I had to worry about, you know, I'm going to actually deal with, you know, someone trying to stab me with something sharp. You know, that
Yep.
was a not an unusual part of my day.
Mhm.
So being, you know, knowing, can I, you know, tap something out of the way if, you know, surprise someone, you know, try to stab me with something, that was, you know, a really good motivator behind my training.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's kind of a, you know, to that meme about, well, it's a peaceful life. You know, here I am now, you know, having my peaceful life, and finding the emotional motivators internally to my training are different now.
Yep.
And I'm still trying to wrap my head around and adjust that. And I think it's helped me get a better focus on, like what you were mentioning, why people are doing what they're doing,
Mhm.
and how can I, someone who's making learning tools, you know, how can I help serve their motivations? Because there's a lot of different motivations. I got guys who are customers who are military, from
Mhm.
police to guys who are also martial arts educators,
Mhm.
to people who are, like you said, guys who are just nerds and they just want to learn. They wish they could fight like their favorite character and they want that character's weapon. And
Yep.
all are 100% legitimate. And the crossover of that is really blurry,
Mhm.
you know? So there's a lot of people who would be like, well, trainers have to be like this, or they have to be like that, or this is what martial arts is. I'm like, guys, I have a bird's eye view from what I'm doing here that I can tell
Mhm.
you it's not that. It's a lot messier than that, and a lot of your friends are a lot nerdier than you know.
Dude, I can't tell you how many like super badass special operator dudes that I know that play D&D, who paint minis on deployment, who watch cartoons. Like the amount of like Dragon Ball Z nerds that I know that are in the special operations community,
Yeah,
it's fucking. I mean, that they're a bunch of nerds. So and
yeah,
and in a lot of ways they have to be, because again, resourcing um something of joy and purpose whilst engaged in something that's so like cortisol driven, like you said before.
yeah,
Because like a lot of the training imperative for people dealing with violence is there's the reasons why behind it is because it's a fear response. They're doing it out of fear. They're doing it out of a trauma response versus
yes,
doing it as a preparatory standpoint. Because like the difference that I attribute self-defense versus personal protection is self-defense is after the fact. It's a response to violence, and it happens after a trauma related event. Where personal protection in my mind is preparatory, it is preventative maintenance, it is more of
yeah,
a proactive approach to things. And so when people are doing the stuff that they're doing based out of fear, it taints what their training modality is moving forward, because a lot of people don't ever get out of that trauma fear response in their training, so they stick with the, well, we have to do this in the streets in our tactical pants and mismatched camo and shit like that. So
yeah.
yeah, it's something special.
And that falls into, you know, my old line of work, where, you know, we'd often get called into or hired into work to programs that were just coming apart at the seams, and they
Hmm.
couldn't figure out why. We'd come in and we'd retrain people,
Hmm.
and it wasn't just teaching people how to handle physical altercations. It was teaching them how, you know, the preparatory mindset, which was, okay, what is the environment that is
Hmm.
causing the issues you're having, and how much of it are you bringing to the you know, the table? You know, you're sitting there going, oh, I don't know what to do with this situation. Every day, some kind of violent synergy happens between the people in the program.
Hmm.
And a lot of it was like, you know, before I'd say, well, what's wrong with the people, your clients, I'd go, well, what's going on with you? You
Yeah.
know, what are you bringing in? And you discover that the first thing you had to do was not just train people how to handle the stuff better, but also deal with their own trauma that they were bringing into the situation, which was that match to the gas that was already there.
Yeah, the projection.
And,
yeah.
And it was you talk about the difference in self-defense to personal protection.
Yep.
How much you hear a lot of people talking about in self-defense classes, they're all talking about situational awareness. First thing you got to get into is before everything else is situational awareness, and that's great, that's good, but usually what's being taught is how to cultivate some kind of self-created trauma response, how to become how to
hypervigilance is what.
Hypervigilance. How to like make myself almost like I'm really traumatized, like I got PTSD and worried about everything around every corner. For someone who has an actual case of that stuff from 30 years of dealing with violence and being hypervigilant, and now in the last few years being able to kind of scale out of that and watching the brain chemistry shift after so many years of that, you don't want to be like that on purpose. It sucks.
No. Yeah.
And you don't want to have to be all jitters and hypervigilant. It's not a healthy way to be self-aware. Or and I'd like to see more trauma-informed education in the martial arts, because it would be a healthier tone for what's taught and how people apply it. And I think people would get a lot more out of it for themselves. Because a lot of the people's goals of getting into martial arts is, they want to, you ask people what they get into for. I want to feel safer, or self-defense, or, discipline, or this confidence, and all these things. Well, if you're going in there and you're trying to artificially recreate a sense of trauma and hypervigilance and all the, the artifacts of being traumatized, well, that's not going to give you the things you're looking for. It's going to give you the opposite.
Yep.
And when you're getting into that mindset of, you're pushing yourself to be in a mindset that is closely resembling someone who's traumatized, you're going to be more vulnerable to persons who will take advantage of that.
Yes.
Hence, we see the, the prevalence of cult-like, personality cults in martial arts and whatnot. It's if people are teaching you to come in there and be traumatized, well, then you're being set up to being abused, and you will be traumatized then if you weren't already.
Absolutely, because you're for one, you're putting up the dynamic of a tyrannical manipulator, and you're giving up of your free will, your intellectual free will, your emotional free will, to somebody who is not doing it for the true benefit of the client. They're doing it for their own sense of ego and control, and that's super dangerous and super scary. And for, again, people need to be more informed and resourced for themselves, as one, establishing boundaries, knowing who they are, and recognizing these things. And again, that comes from education, because we go to martial arts for education. We go to the fitness center for education and improvement. Why not do that with mental health and behavioral health, and go into that process of internal training and also external training, so we can recognize when somebody's trying to manipulate and take advantage of you, or on top of all, like you said, learning not to project and not being looking through the lens of our own trauma state, and thus creating a larger problem. A really cool podcast that's coming up is being led by Eric Poirier, and Mark Medieros is involved, and I forget who the third guy is, but they're specifically talking about trauma-informed education for martial arts and fitness. So that's something that's really cool to see in the space of what we do. But yeah, let's come out of that for a little bit, because it's heavy. It's heavy, and we get a little heavy in this, and I haven't had enough coffee for it. So one last bit. So the bladesmith, historically, the blacksmith, they create tools and they create weapons of war, but it was a meditative, honored position in the community, where they're sitting there making the things that build the houses, cut the meat, and deal with the combative aspect. And and there's also like the meditative state, as you said, with the creation of art, functional art. And I can imagine it is the same for you, where like the purpose and the love and the intentionality is put into your pieces. Because I wonder, what is your favorite piece and attached to
Oh
that
man,
artistry?
that is really tough to say.
Yeah.
Um, holy crap, that's a killer question. Um, I go through this thing of like, this piece is my new favorite thing, and then
Yeah.
I'll come up with something else and be like, this is my favorite, and it's really hard to. Some of the things that I really like is I so a lot of people I had to kind of teach people about Vulpes and what it really is.
Hmm.
So I do make training weapons, and it
Hmm.
started out as a training weapon. That's what I do is make training weapons and teaching tools for martial arts. But I also make functional tools. So I actually make functional impact weapons. So I make a
Sweet.
lot of war clubs. I say probably half of my sales and what I make these days are actual functional impact weapons. So
Sweet.
war clubs have become a huge thing, and that's actually become my favorite genre to work in is the war clubs. And I do things where I have my own designs. I do traditional designs, and talk about yeah, he's got the war club video up there. Uh, so getting into war clubs and things, I actually kind of really got going with it. Originally was with Polynesian war clubs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that started with some because I do a lot of custom orders.
Hmm.
I had some guys, a couple different guys, all separately came around the same time and said, "Hey, look, we have Maori or Polynesian um, ancestry, and we're kind of one guy was like working with him and his brother were like experimenting. He had a PTK background, but he was also
Hmm.
experimenting with his traditional martial arts and trying to rebuild and reconnect with those. And he's like, could you
Yeah.
make me some tools so I can train that with? So I started making some of the traditional war clubs, and it just took off from there. And got into doing like the Fiji war clubs
Hmm.
in different sizes, Native American style war clubs. The patus were a big thing. Patus have become like an enormous part of my business. I do a ton of these and really enjoy doing that. The Wahaikas. So
Hmm.
I send a lot of stuff down towards Australia
Nice.
to the community down there. Has me, make a lot of stuff for them. That's been a big part of the adventure has been like getting into the war club because it's like so many different cultures. I mean, have war clubs. I mean, every culture
Mhm.
has a sword, right? But clubs go back even further. Before
Yes.
humans figured out swords, we were just picking up stick. From caveman days till now, we're still using the club. So
Yeah.
it's happening to something even older than the blade.
Hmm.
So it's that much more primal and human to me, and something
Hmm.
that goes even pre-human. Because you
Hmm.
can find other primates will pick things up and bonk each other with things. So it goes something even deeper. So I feel like I'm like pulling the roots up
Hmm.
further and further back, and by getting into the war clubs. Um, got into doing the Aztec weaponry, the Maquahito.
Yeah, that's cool.
This has been a big thing. People just love this stuff, doing all different sizes of these. And found a guy who's actually still making traditional versions
Yeah.
of these down
Yep.
in Southern
Yep.
California.
Yep.
And he does with the obsidian and stuff. And I've talked with him, and he's such a cool guy. He's actually, carrying through those old arts, and keeping them alive. So part of the thing with the connection for me with the Polynesian war clubs in particular is the talking to some folks who were from like Samoa, and they were
Hmm.
talking about how, and also in New Zealand, that a lot of the traditional actual heirloom pieces and weapons
Are
that
missing.
were being they're missing and they're getting
Hmm.
sold and taken out because
Yep.
every other person, you got people in America who are like, oh, I want to collect that stuff, and they're taking out all these these important cultural you know items out of the actual culture.
Hmm.
So one of the things with doing things like making the patus and some of the Polynesian war clubs is, are you familiar with the tactic they were trying to use to reduce rhino hunting? by making artificial rhino. They're making artificial rhino horn.
Yeah.
They're flooding the market with artificial rhino horn to kind of like ruin the the market in a way, and for selling rhino horns, which, or and they it's another. I think they may have been doing some similar stuff with elephant ivory. So it got me thinking. I'm like, okay, is there a applicable way that these could apply to that kind of situation? And what it's helped do is that I'm hoping that, if there's, markets out there for like the tattoos, for people to from people abroad wanting to buy these, heritage items out of their cultures and where they're supposed to be, with the people who own them, rather than people collecting these and pulling them out of the culture because maybe they're fascinated, interested with the item and the art behind it. If I can provide a substitute, so they can say, boy, Oaxaca's, I really think Oaxaca's an amazing thing. I wish I had one. And they're like, cool, here's a Oaxaca for you. Leave theirs alone.
Yep.
Let them, the actual Oaxacas belong to, the people who they belong to. You want a Oaxaca? Cool. Here's one. And you can go out and beat on this and have a good time because you can't break this one,
Yeah.
And it's not taking the historical or cultural item out of its proper context. So for me, there's a kind of a, subtle or hidden motivation going on there, is if that helps deter the market for the actual historical items getting pulled out of their culture, and if that helps, awesome. At the same time, a lot of the folks whose culture it is to use these weapons have asked me to make them for them so they can practice
without breaking
with something that they don't want to get. I broke Grandpa's green jade tattoo, and now he's gonna like beat me with it for doing that. You want to be able to have something that you can actually train with or use for performance, different cultural performance things I've had people use them for. So if I can provide that, and that's helping them to keep their cultural practices alive in the face of everything out there trying to destroy that, then that's a way to give back. I mean, these cultures are giving me something that I can make and do. And so for me, it's really important that I need to like feed back into that and make sure pay the dues. So that's awesome. For me, that's if you ask what's favorite, I think the Polynesian clubs in particular, because there's that opportunity in those in particular seems to take place.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's very noble, because like there is the issue the issue of cultural appropriation and colonial like issues of like straight up stealing stuff like the British did throughout the world, and the Spaniards did. What is interesting, actually what is really important, is an antique tool that belongs to the people of the blood whom utilize that tool in warfare to defend the people and the blood. That needs to stay with the people, because there's a certain level of sacred spirituality to it. It sounds esoteric, but the fact is, if you look at cultures across the board with warrior traditions, there is a certain spirituality attached to the weaponry and usage to defend the people. And so with that, when it gets stolen and taken away, it's like taking a bit of the ancestor away and the honor and respect of that tool. And not to mention the honor and respect of carrying the name and the blood of the slain, because the fact is, the responsibility of taking a life is, one, you have to take the honor and respect of the life that you took. And the way you do that is, one, carry the tool that you've had that did that, and not necessarily worship it, but it goes to the philosophy of, so long as you tell the stories, the names, and the deeds of the dead, they will gain immortality. And that applies to the dead that is the enemy, because for one, they were men and women. They were loved by somebody. They belonged to a culture. They belonged to a people. And the way you keep them alive, even though they were killed by this tool by a person, is by carrying that tool and telling the story of when that occurred. Because like a circumstance that I run into is my adoptive family are Irish German, but more importantly, my adoptive grandfather was a World War II Marine. He was a Marine Raider. And he has artifacts that he brought back from campaign, such as weapons that he brought back from people that he took their lives from. And holding on to those weapons helps give honor for one, his job and his sacrifice, and the same with the soldiers that he had killed in their honor and their sacrifice and keeping their memory alive. Caveat to that is my father, and for some odd reason, is finding the need to make those tools disappear and those weapons disappear, when the fact is they need to stay in the family. Because one, we have to carry that tradition, not necessarily the tradition of killing, but the respect and honor, once again, we keep coming back to that, of the family lineage of warfare and the sacrifice of both the family and the slain. And that's important. And the same goes back to tribal tools and indigenous weapons, because again, it's part of the people, it's part of the family, it's part of the lineage and culture that needs to be kept alive. Because the issue we run into with modern society is, for one, we run into a homogenous society that assimilates, and all the unique identity of a people gets lost to obscurity, and that's really sad.
No, right on. I absolutely agree. And there's, I have similar touchstones within my family history.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was both my grandfathers were World War II vets,
Mm-hmm.
and one in Pearl Harbor and
Yep.
one in, he was on the beach at D-Day as a medic, Battle
Yep.
of the Bulge and something. And, those things that get passed down, little artifacts, little things, the books and
Mm-hmm.
objects from uniforms and all the things, even stories themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's that magic in those. Like, when my siblings and I have connected over, we sat down over recently in a few years and put our heads together and each told stories that we remember hearing our grandfather or our father
Yeah.
talk about in their military, their war experiences. And we realized that we each were carrying pieces of stories
Yeah.
individually. And then when we got together and each told our part of the story, we realized that we each had only a piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
And by telling those stories together and sharing each of our pieces, we ended up with a much newer and clearer picture of
Mm-hmm.
where we came from and what
Mm-hmm.
they had been and how much that affected who we are and and what we were brought up to be. And that's there's that magic of that. And some of those things can be the bits and pieces of, like I said, uniform or paperwork, or some of it's been weapons and things that have
Yep.
come down. And there's that tangible personal museum within families that
Mm-hmm.
often gets tossed aside without realizing the value.
Right. And just again, you're holding an item that is physically connected to that living memory, and it keeps it alive. And by way of that, like the training tools and training weapons that you research, I can imagine to extreme extent, one that's resourcing your own educational background and then creating that appreciation for that culture and and in the process of creating it, putting the love of that knowledge and creativity and history into those tools. And that I find that is really beautiful.
It also applies, some of the similar thing has applied within being involved in the whole industry, the blade industry. So I kind of took some of the like getting into doing a business was the first time in my life having never had a business before, and all of a sudden I'm accidentally having a business and trying to figure out how that works. And, so I relied on what I already knew, and that,
Mm-hmm.
Working mental health, a lot of your job is, building relationships. So I started using that as part of my approach to doing things. And a lot of, trainers have traditionally always been sort of like an accessory
Mm-hmm.
in the knife making world, the bladesmithing world. Trainers are kind of like, I always joke around, they're like trainer makers are like the cover band
Mm-hmm.
of the cover bands of the knife industry. We just make a bad rendition of the original, like we're like a karaoke version of the actual live blade, and what I wanted to do was move beyond that and also give trainers a little bit more of a legitimate place in that world. So some of it became is, behaving more like a bladesmith, and how I do things and how I function, not just in what I make, but like the relationship wise and building the relationships in the blade industry. And that's paid off quite well. And it's made it so that sharing the creativity with other knife makers, you're talking about, delving into the history of why we make what we make and how we make it, and sharing that with live blade knife makers. The way I make my trainers is very different than pretty much what everybody else does out there. Traditionally, most trainers are more of a, they usually cut out on a router or a water jet or something, and then just like a, not a very kind of a two-dimensional sword-shaped type, object. I wanted to do something different and make, when instead of a sword-shaped, polymer sword-shaped object, I wanted to make a polymer sword. I wanted to actually have blade geometry and balance and, the same bevels and movement and feel. So the only way to really do that properly was to actually be a bladesmith, and so I became like a polymer bladesmith. And it's I'm going to move my camera a little. I'm working with the, my main tool is a 2x72 grinder. That's, the main workhorse in here. And if you look in my shop, it's pretty bare bones. There's no CNC, no automated equipment, no computers, no lasers, no routers, none of that. It's a knife smith shop. It's 3 belt grinders, a drill press, and some die grinders. That's it. And it's a lot of sweat, a lot of work. And it's very different from what's normally done to make this kind of product, but I'm not making the normal product, and that's by design. I want to do something very different. And, it also allows me for that kind of creativity to be, since I don't, I'm making everything individually, by hand, like a bladesmith would. I have some flexibility here where I don't make things in huge batches. Someone orders something, I'm like a chef. Someone orders something off the menu, I make it. And that allows me to, everything I'm making one at a time, I can be making something and go, wonder what happened if I made it this way.
Yeah.
And I can just go off on a tangent anytime I want. It's kind of like, being, if I was a musician and be like, I'm just going to jam out for a minute and see what happens. And there's a lot of that happens here, where I just pick up a chunk of, polymer and just take it to the grinder and see what happens.
Yeah.
And just, sometimes I've had pieces of scrap and I pick it up and I'm like, this kind of looks like it could be a thing. What happens if, let me see what's inside this. And I go to the grinder and start grinding away on it and see what comes out. And the next thing you know, I'm like, that's fucking cool. Something cool comes out of there. There's several things I made that just came out of a piece of scrap on the floor that was like, there's a shape in there. Let me find what's in there. And being able to play with that, sharing that kind of experience with bladesmiths and discovering, the commonality in that free flow ability to play. It's not just work; it's creative play.
Yeah, it makes.
And if my goal is to make tools that for learning, and they're also for creative play. So they're made in a sense of creative learning play, so that people can then take this thing and do the same themselves. So I hope it's instilling some of that, energy into it as I do it.
Yeah, because it's, for one, it's functional art. And I love what you said about finding what's inside this, like finding the shape, discovering within that, because it's so common within artists, especially the physical artists who say like do stonework, do wood crafting, metalwork, obviously, that a lot of them just don't know what they're going to do. They just find it in it, and then they create whatever the universe channels through them. Yeah, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. And for one, it makes everything that you make unique. And you're putting a bit of your soul into that every item, because you're imbuing a lot of your creative process, and on top of all that, just the love of what you do. I keep coming back to the statement of why we fight is based on love, and the same can be extended to why we create is based on
Yeah.
love. Even if it's a tool for warfare or a tool for building a house, it is, you do it out of love, and there's that necessity of why you do it, and it's amazing.
I'll show you something about
Yeah.
that and how sharing that kind of passion with other knife makers. So, favorite knife maker of mine, custom knife maker is sorry, I'm choking to death.
Yeah, no worries.
Is Josh Blankenship,
Oh yeah.
and I own several of his knives. And he has one called the Blackout that was one of my favorites. I have two of them, and it's got a very cool FMA styling to the handle and the shape of it. It's just so cool. And I was playing around with them because I have two of the live ones one day, and I said, boy, this would make an awesome sword. So doing what I do, because I make the trainers for his Blackout knife, and I said, I'm gonna see what would happen if it was a sword. So I literally just expanded the whole thing until it became a sword.
Dude, that's awesome.
So I lengthened the blade, adjusted the size of the panel, the pommel to create the balance, and next thing you know, I had a really cool FMA style sword.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is great. So I take it, box it up, and I send it to Josh. I'm like, hey, check this out. I think you should make this. I think you should make an actual sword version of your knife. And it took him a bit of convincing at first. He's not familiar with FMA. I'm like, the FMA guys would love this thing if you made it. And he was like, I don't know. So he thought about it, and a year goes by. He didn't seem to jump on it. So I kind of revisited it and made another one. And that one I kind of fancied it up with some newer stuff where I could do like a copper patina.
Yeah, it's got a ramp on
style.
it.
Yeah, so I gave it a little more pizzazz to it because I thought that might speak to him a little more. And I sent him that one. And that's what did it. He was like, fine, I'm going to make it. So this is what happens when you kind of reverse the order of the universe, whereas usually bladesmiths make something and then trainer makers make a trainer of the live blade.
Yeah.
So I've been starting to kind of turn things around, and I have people making live blades of my trainers.
That is awesome.
So this was the live blade based on a trainer, started life as a trainer.
Yeah.
And that's becoming a process that's happening more and more. I've got several things in process that are where I'm having live blade designs made by makers that are coming out. And those are coming from trainers originally.
Sweet.
I developed a relationship with Zombie Tools recently.
Okay. Yeah.
I was at Blade Show, and I ended up talking with Joey Arbor, and he kind of gave me the green light. So I'm doing authorized trainers of Zombie Tools. Pretty much everything in their catalog. So that's something I'm just getting started up. This is one prototype I just did for the Reaver Cleaver. So that's like a brand new, I literally put this in the website today. But they, at the same time, they're also talking about the creativity factor and favorites. This might be one of my favorites. This is my glaive. And this is my own design. And it's just one of those what if kind of things, and I took something smaller I had made and just made it bigger and changed it around. Next thing you know, I had a 48-inch long. Is it spear? Is it glaive? Is it a panavis? Is it?
It's a great zombie killing tool.
It is, and so I ended up. They end up contacting me, Zombie Tool, and say, "Hey, we might want to make something, based on that." So I was like, "Cool." So I sent them one, and they, after I think they probably chased each other around the shop with it. They said they've been working on sorting out how to make one of those. So it's another example of building a different type of relationship with the bladesmithing community and trainer makers, to where instead of it always just us being the cover band, now we're starting to write some, I want to make it so, well, we can write music too, you know, and kind of make it go the other direction and take the, I do a lot of design work, from doing, making custom orders for people all the time
Mm-hmm.
to also designing a lot of my own stuff. So I literally like have hundreds and shoot, I keep a minimum of 200 different models in my website at any given time that people can
Yeah.
have done. And if I figured out how many designs I've done that I've created in just in the last few years, it might push into the 1,000 or more.
That's crazy.
And then I also crowdsource, design concepts with customers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you said, "Hey, man, I have this custom idea," and you draw out this picture. You say, "Can you make this for me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do that." So I make it for you, and then we both go, "This came out cool." One of the things that can be done is, if you want, we can make that a catalog item and name it, and then I put a little bio with Kurt.
Yeah.
He created this, and this is why. This is his martial art background, and this is his design concept behind this. And now you're a part of Vulpes. And there's a lot of that in the catalog. There's a lot of customer designs in there where, the idea is not only can you just, buy something, not just have something made, but you can actually become part of Vulpes and actually have,
Yeah.
you can have your design get its time in the spotlight. Your creative, we can immortalize your creativity for you, and other people can enjoy it. And so that's become a part of what I do. And it's been talking about the relationship building. It's a way to build a relationship with the customers where it's not just, I make stuff, you buy it.
Yeah, because
I want it to be more than that. I want the participatory factor and people invested in it and getting to be, a piece of themselves in it if they want to.
yeah, I mean, what a better way to build bridges? Because like the collaborative spirit is one, you're building from the knife maker to the practitioner to the tool trainer. So that's amazing. So it's three data points of connection. And like in the spirit of like what we run into in the martial arts community, not just FMA, but in the martial arts community, is this whole issue about like building bridges and not barricades. And what a beautiful way to build a bridge is, one, get the insight and design from a practitioner, then making the design for a trainer, and then making a live blade for it. I mean, and also it sparks conversation, helps propagate the art forward. That's amazing. That's, again, rocks in a pond for a positive effect.
And if that helps a guy like, for like Josh, he wasn't very familiar with FMA, but the guy makes an amazing knife. So if I can help a knife maker with his skill level understand what we want more, that's good for him. It's good for us, So it's helping to kind of cross-pollinate knowledge base and skill sets around there, so that hopefully become, instead of, like I said, instead of just being somebody who makes accessories for the knife industry, I want to be a catalyst for growth and bridge building between the customers and the people making the stuff, the martial arts, because, FMA in particular, it's a weapons-based systems for the most part, which means we use stuff. We have actual tools to interface our art with, and we need those things, and we need people who can make those things. And part of being better at any kind of tool-based skill set is having good tools. So if I can help, catalyze that process better, this was another good example. I took one of my war clubs. This is a mini Dow, and I took two of them out. This is like a small size, and there's a larger two-handed size, and it's a war club, but it's designed to move like a sword.
Yeah,
almost like a Dow sword.
Yeah.
And I sent it to Aaron Blanchard, Erroneous Blades, and he's a good friend and a knifesmith, and he's really good with doing the Japanese style handle wraps.
Yeah, that's
like
cool.
A modernized version of that. So I sent them to him, and he did his magic on it. And so the idea is, okay, now we have something where it's like two sets of hands, two minds into the same thing, and then we create a collaboration piece, and then we sell that, and split it up so that we have this. It's not just about making a buck, collaborating on a buck, but the collaboration of two art forms going in together and building those bridges, and hopefully setting good example out there for, positivity. I think before we started, we were talking about, politics and FMA. there's politics and everything, you know, in the knife industry. There's people who are, you know, at each other and stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
build bridges, you know. And so, you know, for me, if I can, you know, there's a good example of building bridges within the knife community. You know, if that can help set good examples and translation into the FMA world. Trying to think of some other things.
Yeah. So there is a question.
I got some.
So here, hey, there's a question that popped up
Yep.
from Sammy about that about the glaive of yours. He was wondering
Yeah.
what was the weight of it.
Oh shoot. Actually, I can tell you that in 10 seconds here.
Yeah.
Because I keep a scale here. And since he asked, I'm going to show him something even cooler in just a second. When I got like no place to put this. The table I usually would do that on has stuff on it right now. 2 pounds 4 ounces.
Okay.
So it moves quite fast. There's some design concepts in there for techniques and movements. You know, from an FMA point of view, it's designed so you could have that, you know, long range use. If you're getting, I gotta watch my grinder. It's hard to move things around because I got a grinder right here. But for close quarter work, you can grab it up to here, and you can actually bring that. You can see how close you can get into like a medium range into there, and still get. And if into the clinch range, I have that pommel on there, so there's actually things that can be used to like. But what's really wild is we talk about the Largo range. This has a leverage factor. The way this works here with this pommel is that if you need to, instead of just reaching out like, you know, like a sabot or spear, you can actually slide all the way down to the pommel.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
And actually get, I mean, it literally reaches out of the camera and get a full swing. Now, someone might say, yeah, but if that was a live steel one, it'd be too heavy to do that. That's what I was suspected, but here's what we did. A local customer had a bladesmith make a live steel version of this.
That's
so there
awesome.
is an actual live steel one out there, and it was built pretty heavy. And I was like, oh, bring it over. I have to check this out because now I want to see if I could move this thing in steel. And let me tell you, it moved. It was heavier, but it moved just as nice because the if it's something's well balanced and built right, even if you increase the weight, it should still move nicely.
Yeah.
Because it's about how it moves. And I was able to move that thing around really nicely. And I was like, the final thing is, can I get a full swing on that? And I was able to take it, go from, you know, medium range to sliding out that surprise, you know, reach across a 4 foot range, you know, reach. And it swung beautifully, fully in control, and recovered nicely. If that had, you know, if you had swung that on a human, you probably would have just taken them clean in half with no problem.
Yeah.
So the live steel version is still pretty formidable.
That's awesome. Like, totally nerding out. Like my that opening scene in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings when they're doing the Battle of Gorgoroth with all the glaives. Oh, that's fucking amazing.
So
that's what that reminds me of.
How this started. I made one of those for fun. And I discovered that it looked cool in the movie, but it sucked in real life. It was awkward.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm going to redesign one that would work. And that's what this is. I shortened the blade, did some different changes in the curves in the handle, and this one actually worked. The movie design version was just really weird and didn't move well. So this was my, what if the elves actually had someone who could design something proper, you know? You know, you think if you're going to live 10,000 years, you could design a sword that worked, you know?
I mean, if they're on the Rings of Power budget and design team, then yeah, that's a whole other thing.
So
anyways,
I'm going to help you nerd out a little more. So
yeah.
Something fun I've been doing is been taking things, and I'll take like a standard, you know, weapon like this, like the glaive. And since I've been actually also vending in a bit into the Comic-Con world, I was like, what if I, there it is. That's about what I'm about to show you here. So I was like, started playing around and doing variants of stuff. And I took the glaive and I did what you just had in the video there and did what I call the xenomorph version, where I took the aesthetics of the aliens and xenomorph, the xenomorphs, and kind of gave that kind of a finish, kind of carved into. It's all done by hand. So it would have a different kind of feel to it, and then I do a patina finish with like a copper, because it comes almost a rusty,
that's awesome,
coppery
man.
look to it. So the idea is, you can take something, a basic weapon, and then go, well, what if, and then run with it, and I can give it a whole different appearance and look. Now, I've got guys, some of the HEMA guys who are with some imagination that took this and we're doing experiments of what, kind of techniques could translate to it. And then, the same guy can be like, well, I got to go to the con. I want this version, and then he can show up with that and have something totally,
Or Batleth or a Mechleth. Oh, man.
Exactly.
I need to buy your Mechleth.
Those things are intense. I'm actually going to, I have a Comic-Con coming up in September here in Rochester, and I want to make some variants. I'm going to kind of take my Mechleth design and do variants. Another example, this is a Egyptian. This is the Khopesh, the Egyptian style Khopesh. There's tags in the way. But this is like the standard version. It's got some fullers and things. Like, I don't know anybody else that's bothering doing fullers on trainers and polymer trainers except my insane ass. And those are actually for those who are like into this kind of thing. But my fullers are all hand ground. That's just done freehand with a die grinder. No routers or anything like that. That's me bragging. Because it's kind of badass pulling it off. It took a while to develop that skill set. But this is another xenomorph variant on the Khopesh. So talk about stories. So I sometimes create these stories in my head and then create artifacts from those stories. And if you've watched Alien versus Predator, there's the scene where the woman character, she ends up teaming up with the Predator to kill the queen in the end. He takes the tail and makes her a spear. And she's got a shield made out of a skull, and it's like, and I was like, that's awesome. This artifact now exists from this battle. And then I thought, okay, so that's fun, but what if that same kind of story occurred at different time points in history and in different cultures? And so, like, the glaive was kind of that concept. And then I was like, okay, so what if it happened in ancient Egypt, and that's where the Khopesh came from? So, like, what if they made a Khopesh out of a hunk of the out of a piece of the xenomorph, And then I had a few other weapons that I did with that same concept, and just ran with it, like, the xenomorph version of it. And for me, it was like creating artifacts of a story. And nobody knows the story but me, but I'm making these pieces of the story. I've done that with some of the Polynesian tools, where I've done some texturing on some of them. I don't have one right in front of me, but I've done what I call this dragon hide pattern. And some of the Polynesian ones, I've done I tried to did sort of almost a fish-like marine style patterning, texturing on them. And that came out of, in my head, I was watching that, remember Waterworld? Kevin Costner. And the whole thing is that the world floods and there's just, so many humans left in the end. And I was puzzled because the entire, the only survivors, it seemed, for the most part, of this disaster were somehow, for some reason, a bunch of white people in the middle of the ocean. And I'm just thinking, like, well, I don't think so. I don't think that likely. I think what's going to rise to the top in a cataclysm is like that is people from cultures that have a long indigenous history of navigating that environment. And if any cultural group is going to survive the Waterworld scenario, it's going to be Polynesians. It's going to be like, oh yeah, we've been doing this forever.
Yep.
We're just back to
Sea
normal. Thanks. The entire,
seafaring
we just took
peoples.
over. The whole world just became our oyster here. And to me, water world should have actually been, the world now belongs to the Polynesian culture because they got this. They know what they're doing. So, and then I thought about, okay, because in the water world scenario, there's like new, like marine monsters that have evolved in this new environment now and stuff, and sea monsters and things. Like, okay, so cool. What if you have this futuristic post-apocalyptic water world where the Polynesian cultures have, made it their world, but
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing they have to deal with are these sea monsters. So they actually start making weapons out of pieces of these monsters that they've fought and conquered. So I
Yeah.
started making some of the clubs having that aesthetic on it. So it'd be like, this wasn't just a war club. I made this out of that sea dragon I had to kill last time, that was messing with my nets or something. So I hide stories in my stuff sometimes that I'm probably the only one who knows the story.
Yeah.
But it's in there, if someone's really geeky, I'll share it with them. I think they'll appreciate it.
But it's
You
for
know,
you, and it's for you to share. But again,
yeah,
it's for you. Again, putting love into your artistry and the secrets within it. I'm getting a little esoteric and spiritual here, but again, the secrets that you put in, the spells that you put into a tool, because when it comes to the fantasy and the history of some of the knife making and bladesmithing over there, just weapons making in throughout history and through various cultures, it's the secrets, it's the prayers, it's the spells that you put into these tools. And often it's the stories or the names and whatnot. So, I mean, why not practice that same cultural practice with trainer tools? Because it keeps that culture alive, and it's all, again, as resourcing for you, which is, again, amazing.
Yeah. Here's one. If you're talking about the nerd factor. So
Yeah.
this is actually not even released yet. I've only posted a couple pictures of it in a video. So I've had people ask me if I could make a Nightwing stick.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what this is. This is my rendition of a Nightwing stick, and this
Mm-hmm.
is not a partner training stick. This is actually made of acetyl or
Yeah.
Durran. It's much denser than typical, than like a rattan or even typical polymer sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So this I would consider actually a functional weapon. If you train with your buddies or spar with this, they're not going to like you very long because you're going to hurt them. But these weigh about a pound each.
Yeah.
And it's only 24-inch length, and it weighs a full pound, but it moves quick. But it's the ends, the last few inches of the striking end are all
That's gnarly.
textured out, and then I went with the blue for the Nightwing
Yeah.
aesthetic. But yeah, that's one I'm going to be putting out soon. So the guys who want a functional Nightwing stick, that's a thing that's about to happen.
Yeah. So here's a question. Here's a question about material choice, because often we see in the trainer community is aluminum, and very rarely, because there's only a few trainers that I've seen, and more so now with the polymers. And so why polymer versus aluminum?
Well, actually, if you look around enough, you'll find, so different training groups tend to have their preferences.
Yeah.
And some guys are more aluminum-centered, aluminum-centric. Is that a thing? It is now.
It is now.
Some are more polymerous. So I would think, from what I've seen within the industry and having a bit of a finger on that, is that polymer is probably the largest or the most popular type of trainer.
Okay.
And with aluminum running second. Polymer over aluminum. So my take on things, when people say which is the best, it's kind of like saying which is the best tool in my toolbox.
Yeah.
Well, what am I fixing?
Yeah.
My best wrench makes a terrible screwdriver.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on what you're doing and what your preferences are, or what, there's going to be reason for different types of trainers. I tell people, buy my stuff and buy the other guy's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should have several brands of trainers in their bag.
Yeah.
I think you should have aluminum, and I think you should have polymer.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should, there should be a variation of all of those. I think you should have live blades that you train with. If
Mm-hmm.
you're training to be a a swordsman, at some point you should have a live blade sword and learn to move with it after you
Learn
spend
how
a
to
lot of
cut.
time after you spend
Yeah.
a lot of time with trainers. And you should
Yes.
cut things. You should learn how to cut things and learn how things actually work and cut.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an outdoorsman, so I do a lot of chopping wood and things and whatnot with my blade. So I know how very well how blades cut and work with
Mm-hmm.
different mediums and in different situations. So I'm very familiar with that. I know guys who I'm a swordsman, but I
You
don't think
cut
they own a
stuff?
single live blade sword or ever cut anything.
Yeah.
Um, so I sometimes wonder, well, what's going to happen if you ever have to actually cut something and you discover how a blade acts when it's actually passing through medium,
Mm-hmm.
the difference between hitting flesh than bone,
Mm-hmm.
and how that works, or what happens when you're cutting through something that's moving,
Mm-hmm.
or has, organic tension behind it. There's a lot of things going on there, and you should know, how that works. So for me, polymer is a choice. I think it's a good choice because safety. I think
Mm-hmm.
of all the trainer types, it's the safest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that needs a lot of explaining. It also, besides just being, for impact safety, it also, when you get a lot, if you bang up trainers together a lot, you end up with little bumps and
Nicks and
dents and
dings. Yeah.
dimples.
Yep.
You don't get a lot of sharp snags.
Mm-hmm.
Or with aluminum, depending on the type of aluminum used, you can get that. Some of the aluminums are better than others.
They're like sandpaper.
But some of them, you get the tiniest nick
Yeah.
in there, and you run that across someone, and you'll lay them open.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, it's an aluminum live blade. And safety being important, I want, for me, polymers, the best when it comes for safety. There's,
Yeah.
and that even goes over wood. Wood
Mm-hmm.
has that tendency to shatter. If you ever seen the hardwoods used for wooden trainers, if you make an impact and it shatters, not only now you have a sharp thing you're waving around, but a piece coming off of that can spin around and
I had a Boken do that when I was a kid.
It'll spear somebody.
Yeah.
I've seen, and then when it comes to polymer itself, not all polymers are the same. You'll hear people, talk about polypropylene. You hear people talk about HDPE. I prefer HDPE for swords and knives. I think just the way it works. Well, number one, for me to be able to work it the way I do, it works better than any other polymers for my methodology of actually grinding in and putting in the bevels and actually creating a polymer sword rather than a sword-shaped object. HDPE seems to work best for that methodology. It also how it translates and transfers shock and vibration out of polypropylene and HDPE are quite similar. If you look at the spec charts, they're pretty similar and stuff. HDPE, what I did is especially when I was first starting out, is I bought both materials. I bought several materials and just made stuff and then tested them. I would take like a 2x4 and make a sword and just beat the living crap out of a 2x4 and feel what it would feel, and that was before I had wrapped handles.
Yeah.
And so I would feel everything and I would judge, which one's transferring more shock to the hand than which one held up to the abuse of, smashing into the corner of a 2x4 and just getting a feel of what material is going to work best. And HDPE ended up hands down being the winner for my assessments.
Nice.
It gives you, it's, one of the nice things with polymer too is if you somehow do get a little ding or you've been beating on them a long time and your edge gets a little, a little dimply, you take a piece of 200 grit sandpaper or even a green Scotch-Brite pad along the edge, and now you got a new sword. So
nice.
it's easy to fix, easy to take care of yourself, and it allows, with my methodology, if you look at the variety of what I can create, it allows a lot of creative outlet and possibilities.
Okay.
There's another polymer called acetyl, or Delrin is the brand name, and that's what this is made out of. So I have a new series of like stick-based weapons coming out. I got little pocket sticks. These are about to get. This is a whole new product line. It's actually about to come out now. So I got little palm stick guys, Dan bongs for the Korean martial art guys. That guy, I just showed you that. And then I've been doing these. I'm doing this series of I'm calling them mini tetsubos, the Japanese war clubs.
Yep.
And this is a full pound smasher.
Yeah, that hurt.
That's 18 inches, and that's like a full 2.5 pounds. This thing is like an Indian club.
Yeah.
It's just a total smasher. And these are made out of Delrin, and these are heavy, dense, and that's a incredibly strong polymer. It's dense, and it works good for that application. Because HDPE round stock is a whole different thing. But like this material, but in order to make this work well, I actually changed up how I build the handles. Like on these heavier ones, because of the amount of shock that Delrin is strong and dense, but it transfers all the shock right to your hand.
Yeah.
Like if you go out and take a Delrin stick and hit it like a cement block, it's like feels like you grabbed an electric wire. It's like so much shock goes into your hand goes numb.
Yeah.
So what I did with this, because I wanted the strength and power of Delrin, but not all the shock, is underneath this the jute wrap here, there's actually a layer of rubber. There's a rubber sleeve over that.
That's really smart.
I wrap with that braided jute, and all those wrapped handles that you always see I have. The jute gets wrapped over, and I flame treat it, and then I saturate it with a marine resin. So that's like a permanent, hard, waterproof handle. And but this thing you can now clobber, and you could smash bricks with this easily, but you don't get the shock into the hand.
That's really cool.
If I made swords with the Delrin material, what you end up with is a shock transferring sword, but you also end up where it's very hard and dense, where it's going to easily inflict injury on a training partner. So it's not as safe. And also, since the majority of most trainers that are out there are polypropylene or HDPE, the Delrin's going to damage. It's going to ding up the edges really bad on other people's trainers. So if you had a Delrin sword, you're not going to be liked by your friends very long, because you're ruining other people's gear, and you're also increasing the risk of injury, bone chipping, or actually worse. So I won't use that for sword trainers or anything that's considered a trainer. I only use that on things that. Yeah, the Delrin is great for making actual things, for causing damage on purpose, but not good for training tools because of the damage that it would cause.
But what I was saying is, what I've discovered with weaponry is that the attributes and characteristics of a tool will determine its usage, but also the target that you're going after will also determine its usage.
Yes.
So
very much. And a lot of the primary goal of making training weapons is training. They're educational tools. They're there to teach, and they're not there so much to compete. Even if you're using training tools to spar, the goal is not to conquer, but to learn. You're beating on each other, but trying to kill each other. And your goal is to, at the end of the sparring match, be able to still sit down and have lunch together and discuss what you learned. And if your training tools are going out of the way by design to try to hurt someone, then got to redesign, and there's times I've made stuff that I've been like, this is awesome, but this isn't a weapon. This one's not training tools, So that's why I divided my product line into, functional impact tools and training weapons, and I have to kind of clarify a lot of times, because people see the war clubs and they're like, oh, this is a training war club. I'm like, no, that's a war club. That's an actual war club. Though I have some customers who are dog brothers, who are really nice guys, but might be a little crazy enough that they've actually taken some of my war clubs into the ring. But one of my guys, I love him to death, but I'm like, you need to calm down. He was taking a Makuhito into the ring, and he ended up fighting against a guy using one of these war clubs, which is, I'm like, those guys, those aren't trainers, right? Those were like F a guy up real fast, and they're like, yeah, but we both agreed on it, and we're good.
They got pointy edges. You're gonna stab a motherfucker.
I know. I'm like, guys, calm down. But no, they had their fun. They both agreed to their things, and they're big boys. So, but I do have to clarify often, like, these are trainers, these are not trainers. Don't hit your friends with the not trainers.
I mean, you don't have a conversational piece, because that's not. I mean, that'll be a conversation of a different type. Oh man.
Trying to see what else I got. Mentioned the zombie tools thing.
Yeah,
I got more of there's a whole lineup of the zombie tool stuff. The Sharkalope and Baby Shark. They did a FMA style sword there. So these are, actually, I have a whole stack of these right here that I'm putting together right now for going to the Bikini Detergent International Training Camp this coming weekend. Be there for all 3 days with that, with Tuhan Latour and Tuhan Bill McGrath. So 3 days of a Spade Daga and spear training. So I'm making sure there's plenty of these Spade Daga sets. I usually vend on the weekend, do some raffles and some prizes and stuff for everyone that's there. And brought a pile of the zombie tool with Spade Daga sets. And my bench right now, right behind the camera here, is a small pile of stuff that I'm working on between now and this weekend that I'm trying to make and have ready in time for that. And it's always a good time. It's always a good group.
Awesome.
And I like to bring all the fun stuff to that event for everybody, and to pick up new stuff, try stuff out. It's a good chance for me to also, like, put my stuff in the hands of a lot of different FMA guys in person and see what they think, and let them try it out and see what they think, and give me some good feedback. It's like a living laboratory for me.
Yeah, because I've bought some trainers online that, like, as soon as I bought it and played with it, it's like, this is not for me. This doesn't work. This doesn't flow. It doesn't feel right, and that sucks. But when you actually get to go to market in person and actually get to put your hands on it, there's something special about actually feeling what is right.
Yeah.
So
and it helps me, because I tell people, pick it up. Don't just stare at it. Pick it up. Play with it. Tell me what you think. And I try to get feedback from guys that I see. I try to get feedback from guys who are long-term veterans of the FMA world, have been using stuff for years. And then I also like to hear from people who are just starting out.
Yeah.
Because both have valuable insight into because they're learning tools, which means people are going to be could be starting with these. People could be well into their career using these. So I need to know what works for everybody. And sometimes the newbies see stuff that the guys who've been around forever don't.
Well, I mean, having that opportunity to actually practice something that isn't going to kill you, because there is the risk of new people coming into the martial arts, especially the weapon-based martial arts, is they buy the inappropriate training tool and they end up injuring themselves and others. So having something like this is a good starting point, but something that carries throughout. Because I mean, I have some trainers that I absolutely love, and I'll swing that every day because it just feels right and it's safer. So, and I've one that I bought when I was very young, and it's still carried forward. So like, there's that emotional nostalgia connection of like, this is a beginning training piece and it's carried forward into adulthood. So like, at any point picking up a trainer, I mean, there's a story when a person picks it up, plays with it, put it to practice, and carries it on with them. Because like, the problem with some of the wood trainers is they break, they go away, and you lose them. With a polymer trainer, I mean, if you take care of it, it's going to last a lifetime, I can imagine.
They're hard to kill, Yeah. I mean, the industry standard is like half-inch thick polymer. And I do everything. I do all my sword stuff, everything from starting out with 3/4 inch stock.
Nice.
And that gives me, it's thicker, it's heavier, and it gives me more room to work on to do the bevels and things.
Sweet.
If I'm doing some of the smaller knife stuff, I'll do are like half-inch. I'll make a lot of this kind of stuff. I do with this industry standard half-inch material.
That's cool.
But that's you know, I found that when you get down to smaller knife size stuff, that, you know, the 3/4 inch starts feeling a little too chunky. So I've
Hmm.
started to move a little, you know, on the smaller knife size stuff, you know, I'll do 1/2 inch, or I give an option. You can have it 1/2 inch or 3/4, depending on, because some people have preference.
Hmm.
So I try to give that. And that's the nice thing, the flexibility I have is like I can, you know, I make everything to order pretty much. So I get a lot of people who will say, "Oh, I like this one sword, but, you know, I wish it was like, you know, 2 inches longer on the blade." I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, well, let's do that, you know, and I can take it and, you know, I can add 2 inches to the blade, but then, you know, I can also still adjust other factors. So when you add 2 inches to a blade or more, all of a sudden the balance changes.
Yeah.
So I can, you know, then adjust other factors. So I'm not just like taking a cookie cutter and adding 2 inches to it. I'm
Yeah.
designing a 2 inch longer sword. It's a different thing. It requires some tuning and some change in how you're, you know, how thick you're grinding out. I might have to put a distal taper into the blade, and, or,
Hmm.
you know, or enlarge the pommel, change an angle or here and there. But I can do that with anything. So it gives me that flexibility to do what most people usually can't do.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Um, Going back to the beginning, not the other beginning, but the beginning. What
The first
the
beginning.
yeah, very back when, before there was light, before there was whatever. Yeah. So the your nickname Sionnach, and then
Shit, yeah.
later to Vulpes. What was the impetus in the story behind the usage of those?
So Sionnach was just sort of a nickname-ish thing. Sionnach
Yeah.
is Gaelic or Irish for red fox.
Okay.
Sionnach is also the root word for shenanigans.
Yeah.
So shenanigans just means fox games, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and Vulpes is the Latin word for fox. Again, so like
Okay.
the actual scientific name for like red fox is Vulpes vulpes,
Oh. Okay.
which in Latin would mean true fox.
Yeah.
So if you say anything twice in Latin, it means it really, really is a fox. You know, you know, that's a weird quirk with Latin. So, you know, the fox has always just been kind of a bit of a, I don't want to use the word totem, but I don't know if that'd be culturally accurate, but it would definitely, it's something I've had a lot of alignment with, you know, and some
Hmm.
very cool experiences in the wild with them. And they've just, you know, been a bit of something I have some attachment to. And when I was working in my old line of work in you know, the mental health field, you don't really want a lot of your clients finding you on social media, getting into your
Yep.
personal life and things. So I started using the Sionnach crow's mate name as just a euphemism or not, a pseudonym
Hmm.
on social media. And the, you know, joke with my wife and I was the fox and she was the crow, and so Sionnach crow's mate
That makes sense. That's
came
cool.
out of that, and that just, you know, kind of. But when I started getting into doing business and stuff, that's what people knew me as, you know.
Hmm.
And the customer base I was working with was also my martial arts community that already kind of knew me online by that name. So I was like, well, I'm just going to run with it anyway. And kind of, you know what, there's something cool about picking your own name anyhow.
Yeah.
So I just kind of run with it, and Sionnach has just become just as much my name as, you know, my given name, and I kind of almost like it better, you know.
Well, it's a beautiful honorific, is what it boils down to. Because again,
Yeah,
nicknames hold power. They hold
yeah.
special connection to. Again, it's the stories.
Well, the fox thing, one of the important life story connections with the with the fox was when I did work with the in a residential program,
Hmm.
and at that time it was about 14 young men, all between about 12 to 18. And I did a lot of outdoor programming. I would do backpacking trips with these guys,
Yep.
do a lot of nature awareness, take them out in the woods. And on there was a lot of woods on the property that
Yep.
the programmers at. And there's a family of foxes that every year one of the female foxes would have her kits, have the
Hmm.
babies out in this one part of the woods, and she'd come out and the babies would play, the kits would be running around playing, and she'd watch over them. And I found that if you approached respectfully and your body language um, projected that you were calm
Mm-hmm.
and cool, and just you just go out and sit down on the grass, that she'd bring the kids over to you and
Yeah.
introduce you,
Yeah.
and you could sit there and hang out and watch. He got these foxes, baby foxes, right there, and she just learned. I learned that you could, pull this off if you projected, that you're calm, and the best way to project calmness is to actually be calm.
Yeah.
Um, So some of the young men that I work with had a lot of kids with anxiety, and they wanted to come see the foxes. And one of the things I would do is teach them. Okay, before we'd go out to the fox, I teach them how to
Mm-hmm.
calm themselves, center themselves, and also communicate that through their body. That
Yeah.
teach them that if your body is calm, your mind will be. So if you
Yep.
can't get your mind calm, sometimes make your body fake it, and then your mind will follow suit. Since it's in
Mm-hmm.
your body, it's going to follow along.
Mm-hmm.
And I would teach them that, and we kind of test it by going out there when the foxes were out. They'd come out and get it. Chris, the fox is out there. So we're like, okay, well, get your stuff, and then we go outside and we learn how to walk up to the situation, and
Yeah.
then without scaring them off, and then how to walk in a manner that was peaceful, calm, and then have them sit and let the fox decide when they were ready to come to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fox became this partner in teaching these young men how to help themselves and take care of themselves, body and mind.
Yeah.
And the appreciation I had for that, I'm here supposed to be this mental health professional, and one of the best therapists I ever had was a fox and her kits. So that's one of many stories of similar things. We had one other really cool one, was a young man who would tend to run away at times,
Mm-hmm.
and he would often disappear into the woods, and had a really uncanny experience of where I'm out looking for this kid, because this kid he makes really unsafe decisions out there. He's been known for climbing up our roofs and things and telephone poles, and just like, oh my God, this kid's gonna get himself killed. So I'm out looking for him, and I'm walking through the pathway of the woods where I think he may have went, and here comes mom, that fox. She comes walking up the path and stop, and I'm like, hey, I kind of said hello to her, and she kind of look at me, looks down the little path, looks back at me, almost in a come on. I was like, well, what have I got to lose? Followed this fox down the path, and she led me to my kid, there was a creek and like a big fallen tree over the creek, and he was doing like a balance beam over this creek. And she was like, looked at me like, all right, there's your kid, go get him. And then she took off and left me there. And then I'm like, all right, come on, kid, you got to get back into come back home here. But it's the same fox, the same one that had seen me taking care of kids when she was taking her kids.
Yeah.
She recognized I had lost one of my pups.
Yeah.
Was like, here, come get your kid. And just little interactions like that throughout my life with them have just, I figured this was a cool way to honor that, and carry that over into this next phase of life where I'm doing this instead of what I used to do.
That's really cool. It's really special. I appreciate that, and thank you for sharing that truth with me. I mean, that is a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful gift for the effort and emotionality and love and care that you put into your clients, taking on all that, and where the risk of compassion fatigue, and maybe some of it, occurred over those 30 years. And then you have a medium like
definitely occurred.
Yeah, and a medium like the fox and your experiences with it, and then honoring it thereafter. I mean, again, that's a way, because of the stories and the intentionality behind it, that fox and her pups gain immortality. And yeah, that's really cool.
Okay.
It's really cool. The thing that I really wish, again, is more stories as to the reasons why. Because again, within our industry, there's a lot of the trauma related stories. I mean, obviously there's trauma related to your story with Vulpes, but they're doing something with it and creating something beautiful. We don't get to hear a lot of those stories because, for one, the person is still stuck in that, or it's not marketable because nobody wants that genuine vulnerability and that honesty. But when we get those, I mean, that's really special to share with the universe.
Yeah, Vulpes is definitely for me, going from the vicarious trauma of working in that kind of field with the clients that I'm working with, working with. For me, getting into leaving that space into where I'm working from home in a shop, every day, and it's a lot of alone time.
Yeah.
There I become very much a hermit, and I'm here in this shop, and much of my communications like, online with people and stuff, but it's a lot of alone time, more than I've had in, decades, and a lot of time to kind of ponder and digest,
Decompress.
decompress and digest, where, how did I get here? And it's been positive, and there's this thing of, there's a certain freedom of, depending on which part of the task I'm doing. When I'm on the grinder, I have to stay focused on exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah, the intentionality.
I can't really let my mind wander when I'm on the grinder, because the moment I'm not completely present, I just messed up and I got to start over. Because this material is not forgiving. You can, I've had guys who are, grind steel this way, give it a whirl and try the polymer, and they're like, no thanks, you can keep that, because this stuff is,
it's hard.
It grinds fast, and so you don't get, you get to a mistake a lot faster. If that's a way to put it. And you only get so many passes on the grinder before you're done. So you have to do it like every time, every pass on the grinder, every time has to be right every time.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain perfectionism and focus when you're doing that part of the task. And during that part, I get to kind of shut everything out. I just do it exactly what I'm doing, which is a whole wonderful thing to have. And then when I step away from that and I do other tasks where I can think a bit more, and I'm not totally locked up on the task. There's been a lot of time to kind of process everything that, I went through those years working in that time. And time that I think, and focus and processing that I think, if I didn't have this opportunity to do it, I'd be missing a whole lot.
Yeah.
And kind of the recovery of those, the trauma of those years.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot. You go from, like, a lot of people are familiar with trauma, something that happens to you. I think a lot of people who don't have the experience in the field like you and I have, where they don't understand that there's such thing as, secondary trauma or the vicarious trauma.
Yeah.
Which when you hear or learn of the traumatic experience of another person, that you do take on a certain amount, your empathy allows you to take on a certain amount of what their experience was.
I call it the weight of knowledge.
Yeah. And you go through that, and then, so you get this, like, there's your own trauma, there's that you grew up with, and you go into work in a place where the person you're trying to help might be lashing out at you. So you're taking the trauma of whatever they do to you, whatever violence or whatever may take place towards you. And then you're helping, this is happening to you while you're helping them navigate the space of their trauma. So you're getting vicarious trauma, and then there's, and then it's just layers of that. And then you remember, it's still a workplace, and workplaces almost always suck, because it's never who you work with. It's never what you do, it's who you work with. And then you have all the trauma crap of going through all that, in an industry that I still, I'm no problem saying doesn't take care of its own. The mental health industry does not take care of its workers very well.
No, it doesn't. And,
they use you till you're burnt out, and then they go, oh, they burnt out. I'm like, they didn't burn out. We didn't burn out. We were burnt out. There's a difference.
Yep.
Used up, tossed aside. And so you go through all those things, these layers of that. And having, Vulpes and doing this process of working in here and having the space to be able to process all those things has been a lifesaver for me.
Absolutely.
You know, it's more than just having a business. It's having this place that I can actually just be in this little cave, my little bat cave here, and, you know,
It's
be
a sacred
creative,
space.
do
It's
something
a,
I love,
yeah.
and bond with people over that while also sorting through my shit, you know?
It's a
Yeah.
sacred space, honestly. And again, like using the grinder as a metaphor, you're stripping away layers
Yeah.
of trauma and experience, and it forces you to be present, intentional, and going through a process. Again, mental health is a process. Mental health is trying to establish boundaries and boundaries and centering ourselves. And again, stripping back things to get to the root of it. But if you do it too much or incorrectly or just messy, it leads to bigger issues. So why not? Again, as a metaphor, your studio is a sacred space to meditate and find that way and strip away and be intentional to meditate, because as you stated, you were literally meditating and decompressing as in some of the finer detail. And it's a direct corollary to the process of somebody working through mental health. And again, it's one of the things I look at within the martial arts community in general from a coaching standpoint is I use the phrase, coach, you're more than a professional punching bag. So in the case of a martial art, anybody else is, they're more than just like the violent expression. There is something based upon love. Again, why we fight is based on love. And when people learn that, and actually it's more or less when people cross that barrier, that the imaginary line of saying, the procedural reasons why, but actually looking into the more esoteric spiritual reasons, that is a beautiful shift for a person. And that has a lot more sustainability. I mean, it is sustainable and it's more peaceful. And what I find is when somebody has gone through a lot of trauma, they create again a lot of opportunity for empathy. And this is the case with a lot of people who've dealt with a lot of violence, that they have the opportunity to have more empathy, provided they've done the work in between and crossed that magical bridge over to that space. A lot of people don't make it, but when people do, it's a beautiful thing. And when people do and are able to share that, that just adds to the overall collective of positivity. So yeah, that's cool. Deep breath.
Yeah.
Deep breath. Let's switch to some gears here.
I'm trying to think if I had anything wild to pull out.
So do you have a batleth handy?
I don't have one on hand. I don't make
How about a
mechleth?
How about a mechleth?
Nope. See, so I don't normally keep a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
Because I do happen to have more inventory than I've ever had before, because I had Blade Show.
Yeah.
And I just made way more stuff than I should have. But I also was trying to get ahead of things because I had several vending events coming up. So I have like a ton of stuff, but I don't have a mechleth or a batleth. I did a run of them recently, but they're all made to order and out the door. So I don't happen to have any of the Klingon stuff on hand.
I need to order one from you. I need to order one from you so you can have, So
I want to do a xenomorph batleth as one of the things I wanted to do, because that would be the concept. Okay, so what if a Klingon fought the xenomorph and made himself a batleth out of it? Like, so that's on my list.
Funnier project. At some point I need to collaborate and have you make me a rubber chicken trainer.
How do I even do that?
I don't know, but it'll be a cool challenge.
I'm gonna have to think of a way to pull that off, but I could figure out something.
I mean, maybe like those round stock pieces that you have and grinding it out, like the edge grinder.
Now I'm a sculptor.
I mean, that'd be a fun bit of exploration. I
do get funny requests. There are times, there's one of the fun / frustrating things sometimes is I love doing the custom work. I'll let people come in at me with an idea and me challenging myself to see if I can make it happen. Mm-hmm. But then there's things where it's like,
what is that? What the hell?
Did you even look at what I make first before you asked? I had the guy who's like, didn't even ask if it was possible. It was like, here's my custom order, and he described this crazy katana-like thing with mother of pearl eyes on a dragon's head. I'm like, what are you talking about? Have you seen? And this was like even earlier in my thing before I had any kind of texturing skills or anything like
Yeah.
that. So my stuff was really simple, and I'm like, dude,
Bro, I
did you
can't
even
do
look at
that.
what I made? What are you talking about? Or my favorite is the endless requests for lightsabers.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole industry of people making lightsabers, man. Why are you coming to a guy who makes nothing that even resembles a lightsaber and asking me
Do
about
they
your
make
lightsabers?
functional light up sound responsive lightsabers?
Yeah, there's a whole industry. They make them with
A
like
whole
polycarbonate tubing
yeah.
that you can actually like beat on and go. Yeah. Um, I'll get you some links. I'll find the guys. I met some guys here in Rochester at Comic-Con that were doing that. These
Yeah.
guys were like designing and building these things, and they were made where you could do full contact fighting with them. They're like polycarbonate tubing. They light up. They got sound. They got the whole thing. They're
I mean
insane.
the whole point of playing with a lightsaber is the light aspect.
Yeah, and you
So
want it to do the whole thing. Yeah,
yeah, so doing a polymer trainer, that's just a long stick at that point.
Well, that was the kind of my thing. I'm like, really? You want a stick?
Yeah.
You know, like I do. These little pop. I've got these
Yeah.
little palm
That's a
sticks
functional
things.
that's a functional tool.
But I had a guy who actually asked me one time, was like, could you make me a flashlight trainer?
Okay.
I'm like, that's
Basically that.
I'm like, why don't you? I told him, I was like, look, I like having business and all, but why don't you just take a broomstick and cut off a 6-inch piece, and there you got
Yeah.
yeah. Guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna yeah, there you go. Yeah. I was just like, what? Challenge me, give me something, But yeah, I do get some interesting requests, and sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you're just like, you didn't think this through before you asked me, did you? Yeah.
So for requesting, what is your suggestion for that? And also, like, what is your time period from request? I mean, obviously it determines on the thing, but consideration on a request. What was your suggestion there?
So like standard orders, when people order something, like I said, my website is more like, if you think of it, it's more like a menu. You look on there, you go, oh, I want one of these, and you order it, and it's usually about a 2-week turnaround before shipping.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes it's a little quicker, sometimes it can be a little more because I'm one guy and there's life, and
yeah,
stuff happens, and this is or if I'm buried under a lot of stuff, busy time of year.
Yeah.
But that's usually about plus minus 2 weeks, and boom, you got your stuff. Which for having something handmade to order, that's pretty damn good. I don't care what anybody says. That's most other makers at work, in the custom stuff and doing this kind of thing, they're like, wow, how you doing it that fast? I'm like, I work a lot. I work a lot. I work hard.
Yeah.
But custom pieces, like on my website there's so I have 2 websites. I have an old Etsy account that I beg people to please don't order from that. That's something I keep around just for, largely I want it there because I use it for international shipping, and because sometimes it just sort of organically brings in some sales. Which I then think I can then direct people, well, please instead go to my main website. And I only keep a few items really even on the Etsy. But no matter how many times I tell people don't use the Etsy, they still keep going there. And sometimes people order from there over and over and over. And I'm like, each time, please stop buying, because Etsy eats about 1/3 of my money.
People don't read. They just don't.
No. That's the biggest thing I really learned in doing business, is that people don't read. Just, oh my God, that's a whole entire topic. Me punching myself sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you go on the website, the actual website, there's a little chat feature, and you can click on that and you can start chatting, and I'm insane and will answer almost any given time. If I don't answer it, it's probably because I'm asleep or driving or something, but I don't sleep well, so I will be 3 a.m. taking custom orders sometimes. But you can hit that chat thing and you can chat with me and discuss, what do you tell me what you want, what you're looking for. I'll ask you, I've gotten good at knowing what questions to ask, and try to, help the person convey to me what it is they want. I tell them what can and can't be done and how, and then try to make them what they want. And I usually do that by, I give them a quote depending on what they're asking for. And then I try not to charge a whole lot more for custom orders than I do for normal orders. I'm kind of a little backwards in that. A lot of people are like, you should charge a lot more for custom orders. I'm like, I make everything to order anyhow. So doing the custom part and is mostly
Oh,
the really added part of it is me just taking the brain time and the layout work of putting together how this is going to work,
yeah.
functionality. But I'm fairly fast at that, and I've gotten faster and faster at it, and I don't sweat it because a lot of times those custom orders, if the person had a really cool idea
Mm.
and it comes out well, and I say to them, hey, what do you think? You want to make this a thing for other people? Put it in the catalog. And if they're like, yeah, well, then it pays for itself because now I got another cool idea to put.
Mhm.
So like I said, I try to
Yeah.
charge a lot extra for custom work. Sometimes I should charge more, for the amount of work I put in. Sometimes I've done myself in, but that's anyone doing any kind of artisanal work. You tend to undercharge because it's hard to I don't know, value yourself.
Yeah,
So
but still,
that's
it's
something I've slowly gotten better and better at. I've
but the
had
fact that you're affordable and approachable and you have a good return time, that alone builds customer loyalty and makes you,
and I've
like you said, makes you
tried to
approachable.
balance that at the same time,
Yeah.
try to make a living too, because
Yeah.
this is now my sole income. So if people aren't buying something, then I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
So it's always that balance. I was last couple of years I've been at Blade Show, exhibiting at Blade Show,
Hmm.
and I've had time to talk with pretty significant, well-respected knife makers, and some of these guys are like my own heroes,
Yeah.
like people I've, followed since I was a kid. And some
Yeah.
of these guys have been around forever, these knife makers that I've just, they were the guys who I would look at their, in Blade magazine, be like, whoa, look at these knives. Someday I wish I could do. And now I'm like hanging out with them, having a beer, and which is like a whole different surrealism,
Yeah. That's cool.
and the biggest feedback I've always gotten it from all of them is, why aren't you charging more?
Right. Right.
Like all of them, I'm kind of like, well, and it's different. So one of it is that one of the, I mean, I do charge probably more than most people do for trainers,
Hmm.
but I think I'm also offering a whole lot more than is typically made for a trainer.
Yeah.
Um, One of the things was like when I started out, you know, trying to there wasn't a lot of the concept of what I was doing was a little bit different.
Hmm.
Saying I'm gonna like custom build trainers at the level that I was doing, and trying to push towards getting to my goal of where I wanted to get skill wise and what I could put out there. I had goals. I wanted to take things at a higher level than was already out there, and you can build that up and produce the product, but getting people to value that thing when it's a new idea is
Hmm.
harder.
Yeah.
So you have to someone at Blade Show explained it to me, like the first time I exhibited at Blade Show, um, there was a lot of people who were just coming in and they walk by the table, and the look on their face, you see people walk, and I watch people's faces, and they walk past a row of tables of knife makers.
Hmm.
And if you watch people's expression, they look at, oh, there's a knife maker, there's a knife
Hmm.
maker, there's a knife maker. And then there's this Vulpes guy, and they look at it and they do,
Hmm.
that when you hit the dog look, when the dog goes, what's that?
Yeah.
And then the people would get that same expression, huh?
Yeah.
And what is this? What am I looking at? And like they're trying to comprehend, what the hell am I even looking at?
Hmm.
And so I would have to give this quick shotgun spiel, like, blah, 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 this is what I make, and trying to, quickly get the concept into people's head. And
Yeah.
a knife maker that's really experienced is like, look, you're coming in with something new. And in the beginning, it's
Hmm.
slow because people don't even understand what you're offering yet. So it takes time for people to wrap their head
Yep.
around it. And then they start to value, then they experience it, and then they value it. And he's like, you're going to have to go through that,
Yep.
that stage. And he was right. And it's exactly what happened. Like this year, I went to Blade
Yeah.
Show, and at this point, I did a bigger exhibit. I did a full-size booth. I was sandwiched next to a knife making company, and then Doug Marcaida had his booth right next to
I mean,
me. So he's bringing all
what
the
a way to
traffic.
hang out.
Yeah. So he's bringing all the traffic. He was actually my first FMA teacher before started training with on Jack Latour, because he's actually local from here too. So I was kind of reconnecting with that at the show. But the funny thing with this year at the Blade Show was, like the first time I went to Blade Show, it was just like a kid going to Disneyland. I'm like, I'm going to the land of knives. Oh my God, you know? And there was this one knife from this one maker that I wanted so bad. And like, I got my ticket and I stood at the door when they said you could go in. I literally had the little floor plan map. I knew where this guy's his booth was. And I ran through the entire show, a couple of acres of knives, you know, to find this guy's booth. And I'm like, do you still have it? Because I messaged him ahead, you know, it's like, you know, how many do you have? You know, ran up there and I'm like, do you still have one left? And he's like, pulls one out from under the table. He goes, I got you, buddy. You know, and it was James Helm. He was a Forge and Fire champ. And I bought this bush sword from him that it was just like this ultimate apocalypse, you know, sword, you know, like camp sword. And I also make the trainer's clothes. But, you know, and I was just like, wow, you know, I was like geeking out to go get this sword. And then this year, one of my very good customers, the doors opened at the show, and I had made an even wilder version of this. I had another xenomorph one, which had this like Godzilla spines going on down the spine of the blade. It was like really crazy. His name's Ransom, and the show opens up, and he came tearing through the place right to my booth to get that. He walks right up, and he just goes, "This one's mine." And he was like, "Holy cow!" He just did what I did a few years ago. He just had that same experience, but this time it was for me, and which was like, whoa! Someone That's actually. Awesome. I was the first thing somebody wanted at the show, and it was just like that switching of roles was just surreal, but also really cool, you know, to be like, wow, I'm that guy this time for somebody else, you know, to be, I mean, to get to the point where somebody that was their goal first thing was to get that thing made me really happy, like to be like, wow, I can actually hopefully bring someone as much, joy as I had running to get James, you know, the sword from James. Like if I get that guy that much joy, then awesome, you know, that's what makes it for me, you know?
That's amazing. And it's great coming full circle from everything that you had in your previous life to what you have now. So, yeah. So, Sionnach, we've been at this for a couple hours and my internet keeps shitting out on me. So, do you have anything you want to close out real quick? Because, like I said, this has been an incredible conversation full of amazing stories that I really appreciate you sharing with me and by way of with the rest of the audience. And I would love to have you on again sometime in the future if you're up for it.
Absolutely. I'll make sure I have a chicken soup at that time.
Yes. But yeah, do you have anything you want to close out and with final words?
Buy my stuff. No, I just really No, I guess the biggest thing in doing Vulpes has been the experience of, like I said, the relationships, the building of that, the connecting with. I've gotten to connect with people all over the world and geek out over common interests and had those relationships grow into bigger ones. Some of my best friends now are people that I've just connected over this and have bonded with. And that's just been, what a great way to go. I mean, from a career where most of my interactions were
traumatic.
Traumatic, even when they were good, to a place now where I get to be creative and connect with people who share a similar passion. And it's just a great way to to move on in life, and hopefully it gets to keep going for a while.
Building bridges.
However it goes and grows. So I appreciate everybody who's made it reality.
Awesome. And I appreciate you because you are doing beautiful things for our community, building bridges. And again, bringing back the joy and love of and carry that into. But yeah, it's amazing. Well, let me drop you down. I'll do the outro before my internet decides to say we're done. But yeah, just hang it down, lobby real quick. And yeah, I appreciate you, my friend.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kurt.
Well, everybody, I'm sorry that the internet's being shitty, but it's Alaska. I don't know what to tell you. But anyways, I really appreciate Sionnach being on here. I love these conversations that I have because I get to learn so much. And on top of all that, I just sharing time with a person and sharing their truths resources me. I mean, it's putting new cookies in the cookie jar, to use a phrase that you